Carter, 32 years old, and the moment I stepped into that courtroom, my mother Laura's eyes rolled so hard I thought they'd stick. Not a discreet roll either, the dramatic kind that screams, "Here comes the problem child." But then Judge Harrison froze mid-sentence, his pen hovering over documents as his gaze locked onto my face. Recognition slammed into him like a freight train. "Wait a second," he said slowly, confusion rippling across his features. "These allegations are directed at you?" My parents had zero clue who I actually was, what I'd become, and honestly, that was the sweetest part of all this. Drop your location in the comments if you're watching, and smash that like button if your own family ever made you feel invisible. Trust me, you'll want to stay for what happens next because it gets wild. Let me rewind 3 months to when everything started, back to the funeral that changed everything. My grandfather died, Judge Robert Mitchell, 42 years, serving on the state Supreme Court. The man who actually raised me while my biological parents were out living their best lives pretending I didn't exist. His funeral was enormous, packed with every judge, attorney, and politician in the state. I delivered the eulogy while Laura and David Carter sat in the very last row, showed up 20 minutes late, and bolted before the reception started. I hadn't seen them in over 12 years, not since my 18th birthday, when Grandma Rose died, and they graced us with exactly 90 minutes before vanishing again. Here's what you need to understand. Laura got pregnant at 18 and decided motherhood cramped her style. David was a promising hockey player chasing big dreams. A screaming infant didn't fit their aesthetic, so they dropped me at my grandparents' house when I was 3 months old and basically disappeared. They'd visit maybe twice a year if the planets aligned, Christmas and possibly my birthday. Laura would arrive wearing designer clothes, blow air kisses near my cheek, and spend every minute criticizing how Grandma was raising me, saying she was too soft. David avoided visits entirely because Grandpa called him out for being a deadbeat right to his face. So I watched my father on television instead. Every time the Bruins played, Grandpa had that game on, not because he cared about hockey, but because he wanted me to know my father existed somewhere, even if he chose not to exist in my life. But I never felt like I was missing anything. Grandma Rose and Grandpa Robert gave me everything that mattered, real love, the kind that actually shows up. They attended every school play, every soccer game, every debate competition, without fail. They were my parents in every way that genuinely matters. When Grandma suddenly died from a stroke, I thought my world had collapsed. I was 18, about to start college, and the woman who raised me was just gone. Grandpa carried both of us through that crushing grief. And somewhere in that darkness, he started opening up about his work, about justice, about wielding power responsibly. That's when I decided to follow in his footsteps and become a lawyer. I graduated top of my class from law school while Grandpa sat front row beaming. My parents sent a card. Grandpa used his influence to help me land a prosecutor position. I worked my way up fast because I was really good at this. By 30, I was handling high-profile cases involving complex financial crimes and corruption that made headlines. My parents had no idea. They probably assumed I was working some boring office job if they thought about me at all. Grandpa retired when I was 27, said he wanted quality time with me while he could. We had dinner every single Sunday without exception. Sacred tradition. He taught me everything about reading people in courtrooms, developing strategies, maintaining integrity when everyone around you is compromised. When he died peacefully at 89, I felt that familiar emptiness return, but this time I wasn't a lost 18-year-old. I was 32 and I had become exactly who he raised me to be. The will reading happened 1 week later. I expected maybe some books, his watch, personal items. What I got was everything. The house, investment portfolio, savings, life insurance, $3.2 million. Everything he'd spent decades building, he left entirely to me with one specific provision in a sealed letter that made me cry, validation tears, not sad ones. "My dearest Emma," it began. "You're reading this because I'm gone, but my love continues. You are the greatest joy of my life. I leave you everything because you earned it, not through blood alone, but through showing up and loving me and your grandmother when others could not be bothered. Your parents made their choice long ago. This is mine. Be strong, my girl." The attorney handed me another envelope. Documentation, bank statements showing, Grandpa gave Laura $3,000 monthly starting when I was a baby. continuing for over 20 years. More than $800,000 total. Emails from her asking for more money. Text messages promising to visit then canceling. Letters from David requesting money for failed business ventures. A complete paper trail of their neglect and greed. Your grandfather anticipated they might contest this, the attorney explained. He wanted you armed with proof. Smart man. Because, exactly 30 days later, my attorney called. Laura and David filed a lawsuit claiming undue influence, saying Grandpa was mentally incompetent, that I manipulated a vulnerable old man, that they deserved their share. I actually laughed. I was in court prosecuting a securities fraud case when I got the message. The irony. They assumed I was still that abandoned baby, easy to intimidate. They had no idea I'd spent the last decade prosecuting people who thought they were above the law. They had no idea their father-in-law had prepared me for this exact moment, and they definitely had no idea who Judge Marcus Harrison was. Which brings us back to that courtroom. That moment of recognition. Judge Harrison had been Grandpa's clerk 23 years ago before becoming a judge himself. He knew exactly who I was, knew I was a senior prosecutor. He knew what Grandpa meant to me. And he knew the people suing me were the same people who couldn't be bothered to visit a dying man. My mother's attorney stood up, some guy named Richard Palmer, who specialized in exploiting emotional arguments when facts weren't on his side. Your Honor, I need to disclose I had a professional relationship with Judge Mitchell. If either party objects to me hearing this case, speak now. I watched Palmer whisper frantically with my parents. Laura looked nervous. David looked annoyed. Finally, Palmer stood. No objection, Your Honor. Biggest mistake. Judge Harrison nodded. Then let's proceed. Mr. Palmer, your opening statement. Palmer's opening was a masterclass in fiction. He painted Laura as this devoted daughter cruelly separated from her loving father by manipulative grandparents. He described me as calculating, someone who isolated an elderly man and positioned herself as sole caregiver to secure inheritance. Judge Mitchell was suffering profound grief after losing his wife of 60 years, Palmer argued with synthetic sympathy. He was vulnerable, depressed, and the defendant exploited that. She manipulated him into believing she was the only one who cared. This will doesn't reflect his true wishes. It reflects Emma Carter's calculated campaign to inherit his wealth. I kept my face neutral, cataloging every distortion. My attorney Thomas stood for our opening. Your Honor, this case is simple. Judge Mitchell was brilliant, careful, and intentional. He left his estate to the person who earned it through 32 years of consistent love and presence. Evidence will show, plaintiffs received over $800,000 from him, while barely maintaining contact. Meanwhile, Emma Carter showed up every single day. Judge Harrison looked at Palmer. Call your first witness. The plaintiff calls Laura Carter. My mother stood, smoothing her conservative black dress chosen for maximum sympathy. Minimal makeup, hair pulled back, looking like the grieving daughter, almost convincing if you didn't know better. Palmer approached with practiced gentleness. Mrs. Carter, describe your relationship with your father. Laura's voice wavered. He was everything to me, my hero. When my parents died when I was 8, he and my grandmother took me in, raised me, true so far, but convenient omissions were coming. Have you ever experienced someone taking advantage of family generosity without giving back? How did you handle it? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And when you had Emma, what was your father's involvement? Palmer continued. He was so excited to be a grandfather, Laura said, dabbing at her eyes. He wanted to help. I was so young, just 18. When he offered to watch Emma while David and I got established, I thought it was temporary. Temporary, interesting spin on abandonment. But it became permanent, Palmer said sympathetically. Yes. Laura's voice broke. They kept her. Made it seem like David and I were bad parents for wanting careers. Made me feel guilty every time I couldn't visit. They turned my daughter against me. I kept my expression blank, mentally shredding every word. Thomas glanced at me and I nodded. I was fine. Let her dig deeper. After your mother passed, did your relationship with your father change? He withdrew, Laura said. Became cold. Blamed me for not being there enough. But I tried. I called. I visited when I could. He pushed me away and held Emma closer. When did you learn about the will? After the funeral, Laura said. I was grieving, and then found out he left me nothing. Cut off monthly support, gave everything to Emma. It felt like final rejection. Palmer turned to the judge. We contend Judge Mitchell was unduly influenced by the defendant, that she isolated him when he was vulnerable. This will doesn't reflect his true intentions. Thomas stood. Objection, counsel is testifying. Sustained, Judge Harrison said firmly. Ask questions, Mr. Palmer. No further questions. Judge Harrison looked at Thomas. Cross-examination. Yes, Your Honor. Thomas approached my mother without smiling, professional and deadly. Mrs. Carter, you were 18 when Emma was born, correct? Yes. And you voluntarily left her with your parents when she was 3 months old? It wasn't like that. Laura started. Yes or no, please. Yes, but I had reasons. Thomas pulled out a large calendar. Your father kept meticulous records. According to this, you visited 4 times in Emma's first year: Christmas, Easter, her birthday, and 1 Saturday in July. Accurate? Laura's face flushed. I was young, dealing with a lot. Of course. Your husband was a professional hockey player making substantial money, correct? Yes. According to tax records, he made over $2 million during his career. Yet you still required monthly financial assistance from your father? We had expenses. Expenses that $2 million couldn't cover? Thomas pulled out bank statements. Your father gave you $3,000 monthly starting when Emma was infant, continuing over 20 years. That's over $800,000, Mrs. Carter. What was that money used for? Palmer stood. Objection. Relevance. The plaintiffs claim they deserve a share. I'm establishing what they already received. Thomas argued. Overruled. Answer the question, Harrison said. Laura shifted uncomfortably. Living expenses, rent, food, normal things. Did you work during this time? Occasionally, retail jobs. And your husband? He tried several businesses after hockey ended. Tried, Thomas. Repeated. A sports bar that lasted 11 months. A coaching company with 0 clients. A memorabilia shop that filed bankruptcy. Each time one failed, your father gave additional money beyond monthly allowance, correct? He wanted to help. He wanted to help you become independent. Thomas corrected. But you became dependent instead. In the last 10 years of his life, how many times did you see your father? I don't know. Several times. Thomas pulled out another document. According to his calendar, 8 times in 10 years. Less than once a year. And you call this devoted daughter behavior? The courtroom was silent. I was busy. I had my own life. Laura protested weakly. Your own life, Thomas echoed. Did that include calling him on his birthday, Father's Day, Christmas? Painful silence. When was the last time you saw your father before he died? Long silence. I don't remember exactly. It was his 84th birthday, 3 years before his death. You came for 90 minutes, left before cake. Didn't see him again until the funeral, correct? I think so, yes, Laura whispered. Thomas let that sink in. One final question. You testified your father pushed you away after your mother died. But isn't it true you stopped coming when he stopped giving extra money beyond monthly allowance? When he retired and told you payments would continue but extra funds would stop, you visited 0 times in following 3 years. True or false? That's not why. He was angry with me. Or you had no use for him anymore without extra money, Thomas said quietly. No further questions. David took the stand next and looked even less invested, fidgeting in his suit. Thomas's cross was surgical. Mr. Carter, you said you wanted to be involved in Emma's life? Yes. How many school events did you attend? David blinked. I don't know. Several. Can you name one? Silence. I was traveling for hockey. Your career ended when Emma was 8. After that you lived 2 hours away. How often did you see her? We had visits. How many? I'm asking for a number. I don't remember exactly. Would it surprise you that according to Emma's recollection, you came inside Judge Mitchell's house fewer than 5 times in 24 years? That you mostly stayed in the car? David's jaw tightened. That house was tense. Judge Mitchell didn't like me. Why didn't he like you? He was judgmental. Or perhaps he judged you for abandoning your daughter then asking him for money when your businesses failed, Thomas said, pulling out documents. Palmer's next witness was Dr. Raymond Hughes, a psychiatrist who'd never met Grandpa. Based on medical records, Judge Mitchell showed signs of depression following his wife's death. Depression can lead to impaired judgment. Thomas stood for cross. Dr. Hughes, you never met Judge Mitchell, correct? Correct. Never evaluated him, spoke to him, observed him? I'm basing opinion on records. Records showing normal results for a man his age? Yes, but depression. Where in these records is depression diagnosed? Dr. Hughes flipped through papers. It's not explicitly stated. So you diagnosed a man you never met with a condition not in his records and used that to question his competency? I'm offering professional opinion. Based on nothing, Thomas said. No further questions. Then our turn. Thomas called Judge Andrew Peterson. Judge Peterson, you worked with Judge Mitchell over 20 years. Did you observe any decline in his mental faculties? Absolutely not, Peterson said firmly. Robert was sharp until the end. We had lunch regularly, discussed complex legal theories. His mind was clear as ever. Thomas called 3 more witnesses, all confirmed Grandpa's mental sharpness. Then Margaret Chen, the attorney who drafted Grandpa's will. He contacted me 2 years before his death, wanted to update everything. We met multiple times. He was very specific, wanted Emma to inherit everything, wanted Laura's monthly allowance ended. He anticipated this might be contested, so he included language affirming his sound mind and clear intentions. Palmer had nothing on cross. What do you think will happen when Emma takes the stand? Drop predictions in comments and subscribe. I woke early, nerves humming not from fear but anticipation. Today, I'd tell my truth, and they'd have to listen under oath. I dressed in a navy suit, simple jewelry, hair pulled back, looking like someone who earned every penny. The courtroom filled quickly. Mr. Thomas, call your next witness. The defense calls Emma Carter. I walked to the stand, raised my right hand, swore to tell the truth. Finally, Thomas started gently. Haley, tell the court about your childhood. I took a breath. I was born when my mother was 18. She and my father decided they weren't ready for parenthood. When I was 3 months old, they brought me to my grandparents. What was supposed to be temporary became permanent. They left, and rarely returned. I told them everything. How they visited maybe 3 times yearly when I was young, less as I got older. How my grandparents showed up to everything. School plays, soccer games, debates. How they paid for everything, while Diane and David contributed nothing financially. When Grandma died, I took a semester off to be with Grandpa. Did your mother help? She came to the funeral, left immediately. Didn't help with arrangements, didn't check on him afterward. I moved home 6 months. Thomas walked me through discovering the will. Did you ever discuss the will with him? Never. He never told me his plans. I think he wanted me to love him without ulterior motive, which I did. What would you say to accusations you manipulated him? I looked at my mother. I spent 3 decades showing up. I didn't manipulate him, I loved him. There's a difference. Palmer's Cross tried every angle. Isn't it true you benefited financially from your relationship? In what way? He paid for your education, everything. Yes, because I was his granddaughter and he wanted to, just like he gave my mother over $800,000. The difference? I was actually present in his life. I didn't just take his money, I gave him my time, my love, my company. What did she give him? Objection, Palmer shouted. Sustained, Harrison said. But the point was made. You visited frequently in his final year. Some might say too frequently. I visited because I loved him, and he was alone. If I'd cared about the will, I would have asked about it. I never did. Isn't it true you knew exactly what you'd inherit? I leaned forward. Mr. Palmer, I spent years loving my grandfather. If inheritance was my motivation, I wasted a lot of time. I could have been building my own wealth instead of having dinner with an old man every Sunday. But I chose him because he was worth more than any money, something your clients never understood. Palmer's face turned red. No further questions. Thomas projected photographs. Grandpa at my games, Grandma at recitals. Every major moment documented. Notice who's missing. Laura and David Carter. Not because they were excluded, because they chose not to be there. Then financial records showing every payment, every broken promise. Closing arguments came next morning. Palmer talked about blood being thicker than water, about grief and vulnerability. Thomas was methodical. Judge Mitchell spent 42 years making carefully considered decisions. His will was no different. He left his estate to the person who earned it through decades of consistent love and presence. 30 minutes later, Judge Harrison returned. I have reviewed all evidence carefully. The plaintiffs argue undue influence and incompetence. Evidence does not support either claim. What evidence does show is a pattern. A pattern of absence by plaintiffs and presence by defendant. Judge Mitchell didn't need to be manipulated. He lived it 32 years. The court finds Judge Mitchell's will reflects his true intentions. The will stands as written. Plaintiff's petition is denied. Furthermore, I'm awarding attorney's fees to defendant. It was over. As we left, Laura approached desperately. Emma, please, can we talk? There's nothing to talk about, Laura. I'm your mother. No. You're the woman who gave birth to me. My mother was Rose Mitchell. My father was Robert Mitchell. They earned those titles by showing up. You're just Laura, a stranger who took my grandfather's money for 30 years. I walked out without looking back. For the first time, I felt completely free. Free from hoping they'd change. Free from wondering if I was enough. I visited Grandpa's grave that evening. We won, I said quietly. They tried to take it, but truth came out. Your wishes will be honored. The wind rustled through trees. As sun set, I planted tulip bulbs around their headstones. A reminder love endures, grows back every wind, spring, survives even when people we love are gone. Justice had been served, truth prevailed, and I could finally move forward knowing I honored the people who showed up for me every single day. That's not a sad ending. That's justice. That's love. That's truth. That's everything.